June 1945, a thunderous steel beast rolled into a British proving ground. It was the most feared tank of the Second World War, the German King Tiger, heavier than anything the Allies ever built, wrapped in 180 millimeters of armor, and armed with a cannon that could destroy a Sherman from over 2 miles away. But when British engineers finally got their hands on one, what they found shocked them. The King Tiger, the pride of Hitler's armored force, had a fatal flaw, one the Germans never realized. Until it was far too late. When the war in Europe ended in May 1945, the British Army began collecting samples of captured German technology. From V-2 rockets and jet aircraft to the heaviest tanks ever built, they wanted to understand exactly how Germany had nearly conquered Europe. Among these captured treasures stood one monster that drew every eye. The Panzerkampfwagen Tiger aus B, better known as the King Tiger or Tiger II. The tank had been seized near Haustenbeck, not far from Paderborn in western Germany. Its crew had abandoned it after running out of fuel, a common fate for these fuel-hungry machines. The tank was mostly intact. The mighty 88 Makar 43 gun still gleamed with oil. The thick interlocking armor plates showed only scars from past battles. And inside, the smell of steel, cordite, and oil told stories of desperate fights on the Eastern Front. British engineers at the Fighting Vehicle Proving Establishment, FVPE, in Chertsey, England, were eager to examine it. They had heard of the Tiger II's almost mythical reputation, that it was invincible, that Allied shells bounced off it, that it could knock out enemy armor long before being spotted. When the King Tiger arrived on British soil, guarded and chained to a massive trailer, even seasoned officers were struck silent. Compared to the British Cromwell and Churchill tanks parked nearby, the Tiger looked like a battleship on tracks. One British officer remarked, "If the Tiger II had been available in numbers, the war might have lasted another year." But as the engineers soon found out, raw power wasn't everything. In the first weeks of June 1945, the tank was disassembled and studied in detail. British technicians noted the precision of the German craftsmanship. The gun sight, the TZF-9D, offered optical clarity far beyond anything in Allied service. The main gun itself, the 8.8 KWK-43L71, was a masterpiece, capable of penetrating 200 mm of armor at over a kilometer range. They tested its traverse speed, powered by hydraulics. The turret could rotate a full 360 degrees in just 19 seconds, slower than some Allied tanks but smooth and steady. The armor, too, was astonishing. 150 meter on the front glacis, sloped at 50 degrees. No British or American tank gun of the time could reliably penetrate it head-on. The engineers admired the German design discipline. Everything had a purpose, every weld was meticulous. They even commented on the quality of the steel. Hard, dense, and perfectly heat-treated. It was, in short, a work of art, built for war. And yet, there were cracks beneath the surface. As the tank underwent mobility testing, problems began to emerge. The King Tiger weighed nearly 70 tons, more than twice the weight of a British Cromwell. The first test drive at Chertsey proved disastrous. Within minutes, the transmission began to overheat. Gears ground harshly when the driver attempted to shift. After only a short distance over uneven terrain, one of the final drives, the gear assemblies that powered the tracks, began to fail. Engineers stopped the test and began disassembly again. They found that the transmission system, adapted from the older Tiger I design, simply couldn't handle the massive weight of the Tiger II. The gearbox was a Maybach Olvar, unit rated for 45 ton, and yet here it was, being asked to move 70, British reports noted. The Tiger II possesses immense power, but its mechanical reliability is gravely compromised. The design appears overstressed in all components below the turret ring. The suspension, too, was overcomplicated, with interleaved road wheels that looked impressive, but were a nightmare for maintenance. Mud and ice would jam between the wheels, freezing them solid in winter conditions. And then there was the engine, the Maybach, HL 230 P30, a 12-cylinder petrol unit producing 700 horsepower. For a 70-ton vehicle, it simply wasn't enough. The British calculated a power-to-weight ratio of just 10 horsepower per ton, barely adequate to move such mass. On soft ground, the tank bogged down easily. On steep hills, it struggled. One test driver wrote in the report, "The British prepared the King Tiger for the ultimate trial, ballistic testing. They wanted to know, Could Allied weapons have beaten it in combat? The engineers towed the massive tank into a firing range and positioned it behind sandbags. Then, one by one, they lined up captured and Allied guns, the British 17-pounder, the American 76mm, and even a Russian 122mm gun taken from a destroyed IS-2. The results were surprising. At short range, the 17-pounder and firing, APDS rounds managed to penetrate the lower glacis plate. The impact caused internal spalling, sending shards of steel ricocheting inside the tank. The upper glacis, however, held firm, even against the 17-pounder's best shots. But the real revelation came when they examined the steel composition of the armor. Using metallurgical analysis, British scientists discovered that late-war German steel had lost much of its quality. Under constant bombing, Germany's supply of high-grade alloys like molybdenum and nickel had run out. The result? Brittle armor that cracked under stress rather than deforming as intended. The engineers recorded. While theoretically invulnerable, the King Tiger's armor exhibits brittleness due to poor alloying. Quality control appears inconsistent. The fatal flaw had been found. The King Tiger's strength was an illusion, its massive armor, its power, its legend, all undermined by the desperate shortcuts of a collapsing empire. After months of testing, the British engineers compiled a detailed 68-page report. Their conclusion was both respectful and damning. The Tiger II represents the zenith of German tank design, an extraordinary weapon rendered impractical by its own ambition. They noted that while it was nearly unstoppable on paper, it was too heavy for most bridges, too complex for field maintenance, and too fuel-hungry to sustain in real operations. Many Tiger IIs were abandoned not in battle, but due to mechanical breakdowns or lack of fuel. In simple terms, the King Tiger was a perfect weapon built by a nation that could no longer afford perfection. The British compared it to their own Centurion, which was then in development. The Centurion had less armor but superior mobility, a more reliable powertrain, and a gun that could still defeat the Tiger at range. The lesson was clear: balance beats brute strength. The engineers' most fascinating discovery wasn't just the brittle steel or overstressed mechanics, it was psychological. Germany had fallen into what one officer called the tyranny of prestige. They built weapons to impress, not to endure. The King Tiger, like the V-2 rocket or the Me-262 jet, was born from a belief in technological supremacy as salvation. But in practice, these designs consumed resources Germany no longer had. A captured German officer, when shown the British test results, reportedly sighed and said, "We built a weapon for victory, when all we needed was a weapon to survive." The British report ended with a quiet reflection. The Tiger II's fatal flaw was not in its steel, but in its philosophy. The King Tiger remains one of history's most iconic tanks, a monument to power, engineering, and arrogance. When British engineers tested it, they didn't just find weaknesses in armor or gears. They found the limits of German ambition itself. Because in war, strength without reliability is nothing, and no matter how thick your armor is, one fatal flaw can bring down even the mightiest of machines. This was the story of the captured King Tiger, tested, dissected, and finally understood. Next time, we'll uncover another weapon of the Reich and the hidden truth behind its legend.